Hi, good morning, and thank you for coming to today's talk on CREA, Saving Tropical Ecosystems. Michael Roy is here to talk about his work that his organization, CRE, is carrying out in Panama to conserve endangered tropical forests. Specifically, the talk will deal with the link between human poverty and environmental degradation, and how social justice is key to the solution. In his presentation, Michael will discuss how CREA is taking a leading role in environmental conservation through the implementation of innovative programs and initiatives that the organization undertakes. Michael Roy is an accomplished conservation geneticist, having obtained his PhD from London University and thereon working in academic institutions in the UK, Denmark, and the US before being made a tenured senior lecturer of zoology at Otago University in New Zealand. He has undertaken biological research on a wide variety of terrestrial and marine organisms and has generated over 40 international research papers. While working on a sabbatical in Panama as a conservation biologist with the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in 2002, he came to the stark realization that the knowledge gained by his research and of others was not being conveyed to the people that most needed it. At that point, he made the bold decision to leave his successful career as an academic and dedicate himself to a grassroots organization that could really be making a change. That organization became known as Conservation Through Research, Education and Action, CREA. In 2005, CREA became a 501c3 organization whose mission is to conserve tropical rainforests through the building of sustainable livelihoods for rural communities based on the principles of science and research and education and social justice. Since then, Michael has been working full-time with CREA. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Rob. Well, thank you, and thank you for coming. Thanks so much, Rob, for setting this up, and great introduction. Thank you very much. So in 2002, 2003, I decided to take a break from academia, as Rob said, and dedicate myself to this organization called CREA, or CREA, and developed the organization over the last 5 or 6 years. 2005, we became a registered US non-profit organization. And our work so far has been concentrated in Panama, a Central American country, which I'll show you shortly. And really our mission is to really convey the information that is out there that could really help in our struggle to conserve natural habitats throughout the world, not only tropical regions, and get that information to the people that really need it. These are not only policymakers, but these are also poor people that live in rural areas, in tropical areas, in developing areas, that really are lacking information to be able to change their lives and change the environment in which they live. And I'll go through a few slides here about the issue more than anything, and then at the end talk a little bit about the work that we're actually doing to address the problem. I didn't really know what to present here, whether it should just be about CREA itself or it should be about the issue itself. So I've kind of mixed it up a little bit just to give you some background about the issue itself. And the issue I will be talking about is tropical deforestation, with the emphasis in Central America. Okay. This works. Okay, so just looking at tropical rainforests. Tropical rainforests are a type of forest that grow obviously in the tropics and in a band across the globe around here. Many years ago, many hundreds of years ago, they were much larger in extent than they are at the present day. About 50% of all tropical rainforests have been deforested in the last 200 years due to human activity. And tropical rainforests right now are being depleted at an ever-increasing rate. The rate is not decreasing. And this is causing a lot of problems. This is causing a lot of problems not only in terms of the biodiversity loss that we're finding. Tropical rainforests harbor a wealth of species. More species are found in tropical rainforests than in any other type of ecosystem, terrestrial ecosystem on the planet. So over 50% of all the organisms in a terrestrial biosphere live in tropical forests. Okay, so over 50% of all species. So if we deforest these areas, we're losing not only the forests themselves, but also the biodiversity that lives within those forests. Now, that represents not only an ethical question, an ethical problem, but it also represents a problem of human survival. Humans are, whether we like it or not, we're embedded in a network where we rely on the services of other species. Those species could be pollinators of our crops. They could be species that provide chemicals that provide us medicines, etc., wood, fibers, etc. And so the loss of our forests is actually will have a great damage to our particular way of life as well. And so in this map, you can see in dark green areas of existing forest, light green areas of highly modified forests. These are forests that have been maybe cut down at some point and allowed to regrow. And areas where there once was forest, and this is in gray, but there is no longer forest. So this is an aerial map, a photograph of Central America, North America at the top here and South America at the bottom. This isthmus, Central American Isthmus, was formed about 3 million years ago. And the formation of this isthmus, the land bridge between North America and South America, allowed species that had evolved in North America and had evolved in South America to migrate between the two continents. And this migration through Central America allowed things like giant ground sloths and those other things that we've heard about that used to exist in North America that actually evolved in South America, migrate up to North America. And those things that actually evolved in North America, like camels, migrated south to South America. And now we have the llamas and the other camelids that live in South America that are now extinct in North America. And so this little bridge here allowed a great biological experiment to occur and actually helped in increasing the diversity in these two great continents. Although many species went extinct during that experiment, there was a great mixture of other species that did survive. Today, this corridor still represents a major traffic route for species dispersal between the two continents. And we just have to look at migratory birds to see how important this particular migratory link is, this land bridge is. Panama is a country. It's here in the grand scheme of things. It's the southern end of the Central American land bridge. It has a population of about 3 million people. It's the size of about South Carolina. It's a very small country. And still has quite a lot of forest left in it. Central America itself has an incredible amount of biodiversity in its own right. It has two areas that are known as biodiversity hotspots. There's the Mesoamerican biodiversity hotspot that goes from the north down into central Panama, and the Choco-Darien biodiversity hotspot, which goes from central Panama down into Ecuador. These hotspots around the globe represent areas of extremely high biodiversity, but areas that are also under extreme threat. And these are seen as priority areas for conservation. And Central America has two of these hotspots. So here we have Panama. And Panama actually is the narrowest country of Central America. And in fact, the narrowest point in Central America is just here. just east of Panama City, which is here, and the Panama Canal runs through this point here. That's the narrowest point. And so if you imagine Central America being this highway where things are dispersing up and down, the most vulnerable point, the most fragile point, is its narrowest point, where things can bottleneck. If you remove habitat in this area, you could have a devastating effect. And what we're doing now in CREA is working in this area to try and preserve the rainforests that still exist in this area, although they're being deforested at an ever-increasing rate. So this is a priority zone for us. So Panama, it's actually the 10th most biodiverse country out of any country relative to its size. It has more vertebrates than any other Central American country. It has more bird species than the USA and Canada combined, almost 1,000 species. And it contains 3.5% of all flowering plants on the planet. And per area has 21 times the number of plant species. In a small area in the Panama Canal, there are over 3,000 species of trees alone. So you can just imagine the immense wealth of biodiversity that are in these areas. But unfortunately, these rainforests in Panama and in other tropical areas around the globe are literally going up in smoke. This is a very, very common sight in Panama and actually the rest of the tropical humid world. The world's tropical forests are shrinking by 50 million acres per year. 50 million acres per year. And in fact, if you look at the rate of deforestation around the globe, Central America is actually losing the most, or has the highest rate of deforestation relative to its size. And it lost 19% of forest cover between 1990 and 2005. Okay, it's an immense amount of tropical rainforest. And imagine all the species that are living in those rainforests. In total, forest burning accounts for 20% of all human-induced carbon emissions. Okay, this is carbon dioxide that's released into the atmosphere. 20% of all our emissions come from the burning of forests. If you compare that to all transportation which is cars and ships and what have you, planes, that adds up in total to 14%. So if we want to do something about greenhouse gas emissions and global warming, we really have to do something about forest burning. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a couple of slides. It's predicted that about 9 species of rainforest species, these are, become extinct every day because of tropical deforestation. 9 species per day. And these species could be species that have the next cure for certain types of cancer or other things that are very, very important to us in our particular society. But even without that knowledge, even without thinking that they could be of use to us, I think there's a very strong ethical argument that this is wrong. But given all those biodiversity and loss of life and all those things, it's important to realize that there's a lot of people that also rely on those tropical forests. People rely on tropical forests. It's not that tropical forests can be shoved aside and said, well, it's something else, we don't need them, they're out there, if they get deforested, well, it's a shame, but, well, they've been deforested. No. 25% of the world's population rely on forest resources for their livelihoods. And of these, almost 1.2 billion live in extreme poverty. So what we're seeing here, if you correlate these two things, deforestation and poverty, you see a direct correlation. You see that where there's higher deforestation rates, there's higher poverty. And where there's higher poverty, there's higher deforestation rates. So if we want to do something about deforestation, we really can't tackle the deforestation problem as a single problem. The problem has to be tackled as one of tackling poverty and deforestation in the same process. Just on one day, 1 year, 31st of March in 2003, there were 200 human-lit wildfires detectable from space in Panama. This is just one particular snapshot of Panama in this particular day. 200. And these are the red dots here. These are the ones that are actually seen from space. There are many more, but you just can't detect them. And in this satellite image, you see a lot of cloud cover, or the white clouds. But here, mixed in here, there's a lot of smoke. See all the smoke coming out from the fires. In the whole of Central America, in 2005, I believe, there were 66,000 wildfires that raged through the burning season, through the summer season, 66,000 in one year. So this is another slide of that particular thing. The red dots are the fires, and this is just the smoke plume that comes out from those fires. The smoke plume has disastrous effects. Not only is it releasing carbon dioxide, it's releasing a lot of other dangerous chemicals. And I know living in Panama City during the burning season, which goes from January through to April, the burning season, even sitting in my house in Panama City, I get covered in ash just if I sit still. Just due to the burning that's going on outside in rural areas, it all floats up and all the ash falls down in Panama City. Yes.
Is the burning being done for pasture land, or?
Yes, mostly, and I'll come on to that. But yeah, mostly. And so there's a lot of other side effects of the smoke. There's there's health effects as well as the greenhouse gas emission effects. And I'll just spend a little time on global warming. And as you probably are all aware, global temperatures have risen drastically over the last few decades. And you can see over a record going back about 150 years, temperatures suddenly peaking or rising up here. We've gone from about 280 parts per million of carbon dioxide as a base level to about 385 parts per million at the present day. This figure rises by about 2 parts per million every year. It's thought that the absolute maximum that the Earth could handle without going into some kind of meltdown is about 550 parts per million. What we're hoping to do through international mechanisms is to keep it under 450 parts per million. Hopefully at some point in a few years' time we can stabilize it at 450. Some are arguing that 450 is actually too high because that level of 450 could actually be too late to actually produce some kind of cataclysmic effect. But anyway, we're in problems in terms of our carbon dioxide release and global warming. We're also in real problems in terms of the biodiversity crisis. And current extinction rates, as I said, about 9 species go extinct every day through tropical deforestation. Current extinction rates around the globe are about 1,000 times background. So before humans, there was an extinction rate. You need extinctions just through an evolutionary process. So there was a background extinction rate. Current extinction rates are 1,000 times that background rate. Okay, so that's all human-induced. And it's calculated that approximately 14,000 species go extinct every year. 14,000, so it's a hell of a lot of species. And half of all species are threatened with extinction during this particular century. Half of all species. And it's calculated at about 7 million species will go extinct this century if we don't do anything. Some groups, such as amphibians, are likely to be harder hit. There are some groups that are more fragile than other groups. These are kind of like the canaries down the mine. Amphibians are one of those indicator species, and I'll show you a slide later about how they're being affected. And some even large charismatic. What we don't hear in newspapers or in the media very often is certain species go extinct. You don't hear these figures anywhere. I mean, who's to know that things are going extinct? The last thing the general public probably heard about is the, I don't know, dodo or carrier pigeon or something. I don't know. In 2006, quite a high-profile species went extinct. This was the Chinese river dolphin. It went extinct in 2006. So sometimes extinctions do come out in the media, but this is going on every day. And global warming adds another serious dimension to this crisis. So there's like a double whammy. We're cutting down the rainforests and causing extinctions. We're cutting down the rainforests, emitting greenhouse gases that cause extinctions. Okay, so there's two things that are happening through tropical deforestation that are causing these mass extinctions. And to explain that a little bit, many species in the tropics live in very, very defined habitats, very, very defined habitats, more so than you find in temperate areas. Okay, so you might find one species of frog, for example, that lives literally in a habitat the size of this room. The whole species is represented by this particular patch. Okay, and so if you remove that patch of forest, you've removed the species. And that's very evident in tropical areas, especially high altitudinally high areas. That's even more predominant. And these species live at the tops of mountains, okay, in these tropical areas. And they've adapted to a certain temperature range, okay? And as temperatures increase, these species will have to migrate up the mountain to find the new area that has that temperature range. Are you with me? Yeah. And so there's only a limit to how high they can go because the mountain is only so high. And so what's likely to happen, and we see it happening already, is that there's species migrations on an altitudinal level. Okay, these species are actually moving up the hillside. But those ones that are at the top of the hill, at the top of the mountain, have nowhere to go. And so they fall off and then they go extinct. They literally fall off. And so we find that in central Panama, in the highlands of central Panama. Many species are going extinct in highland areas. And we also find the same pattern happening in India and also the rest of the world. So it's not just a Central American phenomenon, it's just happening everywhere. So global warming, even though these areas are not becoming deforested, they're not deforested, they may be in a national park, they may be really well preserved, we're finding these extinctions happening because of global warming. So this is the amphibian thing. So highland amphibians, highland frogs, through Central America are becoming extinct at a very, very rapid rate. And here we see some species that have been measured in terms of population size over time, and we see them crashing and becoming extinct, crashing, going extinct, crashing, going extinct, kind of trending to crashing. And the culprit of this is not global warming per se, but we found it to be a fungus infection. Now, we don't know if this fungus infection has suddenly become predominant because of atmospheric or other pollutants or global warming or some other impacts of the forest. But it is so predominant that it's causing many species to become extinct. So we don't know the cause, why this fungus has suddenly been released and suddenly become so lethal to these particular species. There's a worrying trend that we're seeing declining forest growth. Everyone has predicted, and so far there are conflicting models of forest growth. One model of forest growth suggests that with the increase in carbon dioxide, you're actually finding greater stress on forest trees, and this is causing slower growth and slower sequestration rates of carbon dioxide. So it's actually a positive feedback. It's actually you're releasing carbon dioxide, and at the same time you're weakening the strength of those trees to actually sequester carbon dioxide, which is having a a double effect. Other data suggests that some trees actually have a better capacity for sequestration. And so there is a bit of conflicting evidence right now, and we wait to see which one is the right model. But just to show you that there is this particular problem that we're finding, and it could work out that this is actually what's happening. And also, with global warming, we're finding much higher temperatures, of course, but also more droughts occurring in tropical forests. I mean, it's hard to believe that tropical forests could go through a drought, but droughts do occur in these areas, and more so over the last decade or so. The Amazon has gone through a number of droughts over the last few years, unheard of in recorded history. And these droughts themselves cause fires to occur. So there could be fires that occur naturally, and there's more naturally occurring fires now occurring in these areas that never had fire before. And another interesting thing that's been found is that the release of smoke and these carbon particles that are released into the atmosphere, these carbon particles actually bond to water molecules in the atmosphere, in clouds, and actually don't allow it to rain. So they actually bond it, and then the smoke actually carries the clouds away, so it no longer rains in that patch. So the smoke actually has a drying effect as well. So we're finding these local climatic changes that are really severe and causing these really severe local drought conditions where there should be tropical rainforest. And just quickly, no matter what model you look at, every model suggests that there's going to be much higher temperatures in the future. These are all different models of climatic changes, all of them showing greater temperature, higher temperature. And all of them showing here greater drying as well in different areas. So I'll just quickly move on. And obviously, global warming has many other effects that are all related to our survival as well. The droughts in Australia, the current shortage of food crops may be attributed to global warming, storms, etc. And so why is this happening? Why is tropical deforestation happening? Why is the major cause of it? We're finding that most of the tropical deforestation we see that occurs and subsequent burning of that forest, in Central America at least, it tends to be smallholders, poor people in marginal areas that are burning these forests to open up land for agricultural expansion. Okay? These are very, very poor people eking out a living, the subsistence farmers that are just trying to open up a little bit more land to grow their crops. That is the major part of this whole thing in Central America. And what do these farmers actually get out of it? They get out a very, very little in terms of the actual benefits, the financial benefits. It's been found that they may get about 10 cents to about $5 at maximum per ton of carbon that they release, in terms of the produce that they get at the end of the day. Okay, so they cut the forest, they emit the carbon dioxide, they plant their crops, they sell their crops if they possibly can, and this is what they'll make per ton that they released at the end of the day. Okay? If you look at carbon markets now, carbon markets, in terms of selling and buying carbon credits, are between $5 to $15 a ton. Okay? So really, these people are not making the most out of their forests. They could make much more if they were involved in a carbon market. That's the point of this. Okay, so really they're deforesting the forest for a much lower gain than they would do if they'd kept the forest. Yeah? At the heart of the problem is food security and economic security for these people. They simply do not have enough food security to be able to say that I will try new techniques, I will conserve this forest, I will develop a mechanism of more sustainable agriculture over the next 10 years. They just simply do not have the money to be able to do those things. So they lack food security. They're always looking for food to feed themselves for the next day. And economic security, they simply do not have enough financial capacity to be able to buffer them to a new way of doing things. So as far as CREA is concerned, we believe that by investing in these poor rural communities and providing them the skills to be able to sustainably produce food, provide them access to markets and resources, we can address the two problems of poverty and deforestation in one go. And this is a slide just to show the elements of slash and burn, where you have a forest, it gets cut down, it gets burnt, and it ends up looking a bit like this. So the farmer will cut the forest down, burn it, plant a few crops, then move on the next year because the soil is so bad he can't grow more crops. He'll move on to the next plot of land, cut it down, grow crops in that cycle. What he leaves behind is usually just an area that he can't use anymore. And what happens is cattle ranchers come in after him and start grazing cows on that land. And so there's no hope for regeneration of those previously forested areas. And so this is an area that is now a cattle ranch, where you see the stumps and the old burnt trees that was forest maybe 5 years ago, and causing huge amounts of erosion on hillsides, and eventually areas that are just, you can't actually restore these areas, or they won't naturally restore themselves. And it leads to huge amounts of poverty. So the cycle really is farmer grows a few crops, he burns the forest, cattle ranchers come in, grazing their cows, no hope for restoration, causes fragmentation of forests, so these forests are now not connected to each other, doesn't allow dispersal of populations between those fragments. Eventually he'll burn all the forests because he's looking for more and more land. And so this is business as usual. We find it a lose-lose situation because the farmer is constantly in poverty, he's constantly searching for food security, and at the same time the forest is being burnt and biodiversity is being lost. And I will go through this pretty quickly once I have everything up. Okay, so start with very poor people. They have poor health, they're unable to work, they have many children usually. These are communities with no formal education, there's no real school around. Sorry. I did this before, didn't it? Okay, so I'll try and do this quickly. And then that leads to communities with no formal education, which leads to a dependence on traditions. So slash and burn is the system they're using. They depend on these traditions. These traditional farming techniques are not adequate for the current population size. If everybody is doing it and there's high density of people, if everyone is doing slash and burn, you don't allow for recuperation of the forests. And this leads to intense environmental degradation. And there's a lack of state or international capacity, understanding, or will to actually help these people, to bring these people out, to give them a safety net from which they can then move to a more sustainable form of agriculture. So they're really left alone to carry on doing what they're doing already, business as usual. And so CREA's approach is to try and act within here, give them a platform, give them a safety net in which they can realize more sustainable forms of agriculture, which doesn't mean that they have to keep on moving on through the forest, slashing and burning. This is just one farmer that has been slashing and burning through his farm for a few decades, and this is the state of his farm. He has 1,000 acres that he's actually plotted out, and it's his. And this is the state of his farm. He has absolutely ruined it in terms of anything. You can't graze cows there anymore, and he is so poor that he doesn't even own chickens. So this is a real a real sad story. It has proven to be very much a lose-lose situation for him. He's now in extreme poverty. He doesn't have any natural capital, any natural resources on which to rely on. And so this is a very, very bad case. I won't talk about that. So the CREA solution is the CREA solution provides a more sustainable model. The CREA solution is one where the farmer has learned how to produce food more sustainably. This means that they are staying on the same patch of land for much longer than they normally would. They normally stay on one patch of land for 1 or 2 years before moving. The CREA model has the farmer staying on the same patch of land for about 20 to 30 years. Okay? If a farmer doesn't need to move, they have food security, they will no longer be burning and cutting the forest. Okay? That's the essential part of the CREA model. With the CREA model, you'll find many more elements of natural resource protection. Protection of the river, for example, as a very important natural resource that the farmer relies on. Protection of the wetland areas that the farmer also relies on. And protection of these forested areas, these natural areas. Plus an area of reforestation of degraded lands to reconnect these forested areas. Okay? By having this area, these huge areas these areas with large amounts of natural capital, large amounts of natural resources, the farmer will be better off in the long run. And so how do we get to this particular solution? How do we do this? Well, what we're doing is we're helping these farmers, we're training these farmers in techniques that will allow them to become more sustainable. We're training them in providing them information on how they nurture the soil, how they maintain soil fertility, how they stop erosion, for example, of the hillsides. And also training them in terms of how they use their natural resources for their own benefit. And also, not only that, but how to monitor the natural environment, how to monitor the health of the natural environment so they benefit from it. So we train them in making natural pesticides, we train them in making erosion barriers, organic fertilizers, etc. If we can get these farmers to get much more produce out of a much smaller patch of land, we will do something about the deforestation rate. So the CREA model is also known as the PRP approach. It's to protect forests, it's to restore degraded lands, and to produce sustainably. And it's giving people livelihoods that promote sustainability. And the protect part is to actually protect these standing forests, these natural forests, through some land lease program or a land purchase program. We're actively involved in these two programs where we're getting farmers to set aside forests like this on their lands and saying, please just protect these areas. We'll show you how to farm sustainably here so you don't need to burn these forests anymore. And also we have a small land purchase program as well where we're actually purchasing strategic areas that are abandoned. So before cattle ranchers come in, we try and go in and protect those areas. And restoring degraded areas like this that are between two patches of forest. So program we have is called the Partnership Forest Initiative. This initiative is actually one of our major programs, or will become one of our major programs. It's a program of reforestation on farmers' lands, reforestation that benefits financially the farmer, so that they go into some kind of small agroforestry business themselves in partnership with CREA and in partnership with a donor. And so we're providing livelihoods for these people and at the same time reforesting their lands. And this is just one farmer. They have their map of their forestry, we asked the farmer themselves what they would like and how they see the forestry or their sustainable agricultural systems working, where they would like to see the forestry put, what kind of trees they would like, etc. And together we develop a model for each particular farm. And this is one farmer family that developed their own model and drew their own plan. This guy is actually the artist. He's actually a really good artist. And so we work with farmers. It's very much not a top-down approach. We're not telling people what to do. We're asking people how we could help them solve their problems. And we come up with a menu and say, well, how about this and how about that? Does anything you see here, strike your fancy? Do you like any of this stuff? And we come together with some agreement about how we can proceed together for the future. This is a farmer that has succeeded in just escaping that poverty cycle through becoming more intensive in terms of her agricultural production, but also much more sustainable. She only owns 12 acres of land. Remember the other guy who had 1,000 acres? She only has 12 acres, but she's rich enough to send her kids to school. And she owns a brick house. She only has 12 acres. How does she do it? Well, she has a farm that looks like this. She has a farm that has lots of timber trees. In between the timber trees, she's growing coffee, she's growing bananas, plantain, she's growing coconut, she's growing a whole bunch of different stuff. The key here is that we get people to grow things like this, but in diversity. Diversity is the key for these to make a farm sustainable. It's diversity. Diversity not only helps in terms of cycling of nutrients through the soil and through the atmosphere, providing habitats for species that are good species that may pollinate your crops and those types of things. But it also helps in terms of the markets. If something is selling a very low price, maybe you can switch to something else that you're growing that sells at a higher price and sell that at that particular day. So it gives you also financial buffering as well. And so she's actually doing extremely well. And she only has 1 cow and 1 pig. And the other one is to produce sustainably. And we're helping people find new methods of agriculture that don't involve slashing and burning. And as I said, we're helping people link to markets that will help them realize financial gains that they've made through the increased production and the sustainable production of their produce. And these are some of the farmers we're working with. And then we have a farmer-to-farmer training program. Sorry, I didn't realize it was going to do this. Oh, damn it. Okay, well, there's some of these slides. I just let them go. A farmer-to-farmer training program where we actually train farmers in communities to become trainers themselves. So we go in and we help train a few people. But of some of those people, we select some that we find that are particularly good communicators, particularly energetic in terms of the willingness to do this. We train them to become trainers. We give them all the material. We give them lessons in how to present, and they go out to the rest of the community and they teach the rest of the community what they've just learned. And so this Train the Trainer program has been particularly effective in the communities where we're working. And sorry I was rushing at the end there. I realized that the time was getting a little short. So anyway, thank you very much for your attention. Thanks. If you have any questions, please go ahead. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. The first is, what happens for the Farmer Sanchez example? Like, does it reach a point where the CREA solution can't be applied, or what would you do for that situation, and when do you implement the CREA solution? And then the second question is, for the corridor that is being replenished, have you seen that as an effective channel? Are the animals actually using it, and how long does it take to restore the corridor to functional?
Okay, so the first question was, in terms of Farmer Sanchez, 1,000 acres, whether that is a lost cause or not. I guess that's the essential elements of the question. In some way of thinking, it is a lost cause. It will take a lot of investment to restore that, but it can be done. Whether it's worth, in terms of financially, whether it's worth investing money to try and restore that, I don't know. But in terms of the actual restoration that you'd need to do on that farm, it would take a lot of work and a lot of money, because it's really, really way gone. The CREA solution would probably, it would work there if we had enough investment to implement it. But in terms of the CREA solution, we hope to get to farmers before they get to that stage. That's an extreme stage. The farmers we're working with, none of the farmers we're working with have got to that particular stage. That was an extreme example. We hope to get to them before they get there, where it's much easier and much lower investment for us to actually recuperate their farms. The second question about the biological corridors that we're trying to make between forests, and do species actually use them? Yes, they do. It depends on the species you're talking about. As soon as you put some kind of habitat, even if you left it as grass, some species will be using them. But the more diversity you place in that corridor, the more species will start using them. And for it to be an effective corridor for larger species, it would take maybe 10 or so years for larger mammals, perhaps, to start using them. But it depends on the species again, really, and where it is. So there's a lot of variables in that. You had a question?
Yeah. What are your influences for sustainable agriculture? Like, which school do you guys teach? Like permaculture or biodynamic?
We teach a varied set of different methods, and really it's not just one thing that we're trying to do. It's a matter of what fits in a particular environment. You may find for some it's who are pretty well developed already and just need that extra push. A full organic type thing is the way to go, because they know the organic markets and they're ready to go, but they just need that extra push. But there are some others that are, most of the people we're working with are illiterate, subsistence farmers, and they just need very basic implementation of some sustainable techniques initially to get them on the road to further sustainability. And
maybe just like the concept of like diversity and stuff like that, that's enough to get you started.
Right, exactly. Yeah. One thing that we are really avid about is soil nutrition, because the thing that is causing slash and burn in the first place, causing people to move from patch to patch, is the lack of nutrients in tropical soils, the inherent lack of nutrients in tropical soils. And the soils there are not like the soils in Northern Europe, which I'm more used to, which tend to be much more fertile in terms of the nutrient value that they have. Tropical soils are very thin and quite nutrient poor. That causes them to become exhausted very quickly through a cycle. And with the heavy rains and all those other environmental factors, nutrients in the soils get washed away very, very quickly. And so the second year when they try and raise a crop on that land, it fails. And so they need to move. So soil nutrition is the key element in the sustainability part of this. To keep the soil full of nutrients, to maintain that nutrient balance, the diversity in the plants that you plant really helps. You have different plants playing off other plants. You have nitrogen fixers, and you have other types of plants with other nutrient needs, etc.
What's the biggest area of help that CREA needs as an organization right now?
We need help in terms of, well, to be totally honest, what we need right now is help in developing our organization. We have, for the last 5 years, been very much a grassroots organization, working with farmers on the ground, working with quite a few communities in central Panama. And we would like to take that. We've worked out some of those essential models on the ground. We would like to take that and scale it. But to take that and scale it, we need an organization that can support us. And CREA as an organization hasn't really built up, it's a young organization, hasn't really built up that platform yet to be able to launch us to become more scalable. And so I can see that our immediate needs are to build the organization in terms of the personnel that we have, in terms of the financial capacity that we have, in order to be able to launch us to become much more scalable. That's what I see as our immediate needs. Yeah.
Which requires funding.
Which requires funding, yeah.
I was also wondering if you could describe a little bit about how you use Google Earth. You mentioned earlier on.
Right, so yeah, well, we are actually involved with not only this, but we are actually doing some academic stuff as well. I mean, I'm an academic and research is really what I like doing. And so we're working with Warren Wilson College in North Carolina. We have a GIS, a Geographic Information System project with that college. And what we're trying to do is really using a GIS platform, in this case Google Earth, as our basic mapping platform, to monitor forest health and forest function. Now, forest health and forest function is a very dynamic thing. It changes all the time. But human impacts surrounding forests can also impact the forest interior. And so what we're trying to do is measure those impacts inside those forests in terms of climatic changes, local climatic changes, or nutrient cycling, or atmospheric cycling of particular chemicals, etc. Carbon dioxide is one of them. To measure those things in different areas of the forest, areas that are close to the actual source of the impact, those areas that are more internal inside the forest. But the way we're doing it is using sensors, wireless sensors that are placed in the forest themselves. These are little sensors developed by Sun Microsystems, and these sensors are placed in the forest that are detecting a certain thing, collecting data, and those sensors have the ability to send information wirelessly to a central computer that is on site somewhere, and the computer compiles all the information coming from all of the sensors around the forest, compiles that information, and then uploads that information to such a thing as, like a Google Earth platform, so that a researcher or anybody that's interested in the data that's coming out of those forests can see it anywhere in the world. So you can click on Google Earth and you can see that this is, current levels of whatever you're looking at.
Is it linked off your own websites? Can we access it that way?
We're very much in the development stage, so it isn't on our website yet. We started the project in October last year, and so we're really developing the wireless structure, the hardware, software part of that, and so it's in the experimental phase right now. But we hope it will be up and running in a year, and obviously in the experimental phase still, but up and running on a website. Yeah.
What do you see the effects of the Panama Canal actually creating a divide?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the Panama Canal has obviously formed a barrier between what is West and East Panama. And certain species cannot cross that. And so yes, you have formed this barrier. Other species do cross it easily. Birds obviously cross it easily. Some flying insects can cross it quite easily. But even large mammals cross it. At some points it's quite narrow. And it's been shown that large cats, for example, swim across it. So it has formed a barrier for some species. The Panama Canal also has introduced a lot of species, a lot of aquatic species into it. A lot of freshwater species that are invasive have come in through that. So there's an added problem as well. It's not just a barrier, but it's actually a channel for invasive species too. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.